Um,
All right, I think we have a solid group here to get started. So welcome everyone to today's webinar, Innovative Approaches to Healthcare Automation, Lessons from Industry Leaders. Firstly, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Please stay on mute during the first part of the event. We will have time for an audience Q&A, and at that point, we'll take questions in the chat. If anyone has Zoom or technical questions, you can chat Ashley from our side and she'll guide you through. And lastly, this meeting is recorded today, so you'll have access to send it to colleagues who couldn't make it today. All right, so let's get into the good stuff. We'll have a quick introduction and then we'll move into a moderated panel Q&A, and then we will move into an audience Q&A. So I'll kick it off and we'll also cover introductions. So as I'm sure you're all aware, healthcare faces several pressing issues that require attention and solutions. Public health crises and a pandemic have put pressure on the already rising costs of medical treatments, coupled with an aging population, increased chronic diseases, strained healthcare budgets, and access to affordable care. Yet many still struggle with limited access to quality services, especially in underserved communities and rural areas. Continuous pressure exists to address the lack of healthcare infrastructure, workforce shortages, and socioeconomic disparities. Achieving equitable success to healthcare for all remains a significant challenge. Automation, what we're talking about here today, has the potential to revolutionize healthcare by addressing a few key challenges. It can alleviate the administrative burden faced by healthcare providers, allowing focus on patient care, automating tasks around appointment scheduling, claim submission, and prior authorization. Secondly, automation can improve patient safety by reducing medical errors. Technologies like EHRs and decision support tools can enhance accuracy and provide real-time access to patient information, leading to better outcomes. And lastly, automation can optimize healthcare workflows by automating routine tasks such as medication dispensing, inventory management, enabling healthcare professionals to focus on the more critical aspects of patient care. So these are just a few examples, but with these in mind, we welcome 5 experts to our panel for a discussion today on automation in healthcare. We're joined by these experts who have been on an automation journey. We welcome Chad Murphy, Chief Clinical Officer of Premera Blue Cross, Frank Webster, Chief Medical Officer of HCSC, Michael Backus, SVP of Carelon Benefits Management, Amir Azerbad, Managing Director, Inspirant Group, and Wayne Pan, MD, PhD, and MBA, CEO of Selmer Scientific. In today's panel discussion, we're going to discuss the creation of a culture of automation. But I'd like to move the introductions over to our speakers so they can introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Chad.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Lisa. Really appreciate it. And hello, everybody. Chad Murphy. As Lisa said, I'm Premera Blue Cross's Chief Clinical Officer. I've been at Premera for 16 years and had a lot of journeys through the automation, I'll say, ecosystem. And as is typical of probably many health plans, run into a lot of IT tech debt and various challenges along the way. But I think we're making some good progress as we think about our work with the various providers as well as our customers. So happy to be here today, and it'll be fun to talk through some of the focus. I'll probably be talking more on the prior authorization angle that Lisa referenced. So thank you, Lisa.
Excellent. Thank you, Chad. Over to you, Frank.
Hello, Frank Webster, Chief Medical Officer for Behavioral Health for Healthcare Service Corporation. We're 5 Blues, Texas, Illinois, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Montana. For behavioral health, we've got about 15, close to 16 million members. Totally, we're about 17.5 million. We don't manage the behavioral health on everyone. And also my background's emergency community psychiatry. So being able to make decisions quickly, kind of thin slice, move on. What do you focus on? What do you not need to focus on? It's really a premium in the ER. Also teach health informatics at UT Tyler in their Masters of Healthcare Administration program. So been working a lot in the space of clinical data, getting it organized, using it efficiently. And a lot of the stuff that we've done is organizing the correct information as the pre-step before you look at automation. If you don't have the data right, your automation is going to be pretty out of control.
Thank you, Frank. Mike?
Hi, my name is Mike Backus. I'm with Carelon Medical Benefits Management, which used to be known as AIM Specialty Health, which used to be part of Elevance, or which is part of Elevance, which was known as Anthem. So a bunch of name changes. Like Chad, I've been here about 15 or 16 years, working on mostly the prior auth side of things and building all of our new products.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Over to you, Amir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amir Azawad. I'm a managing director with Instrument Group. It's a 10 Pearls company, and we are my background stems across all of healthcare the last 15 years. I've had the pleasure of being an employee at HCSC for a few years and being on the consultant side. So I've seen sort of this pendulum, if you will, of how things have shifted from more hands-on administrative overhead of care management, et cetera, utilization management, to where it's at now, trying to reduce cost and figure out how to make automation happen better, how to make the business teams more enabled, if you will, to be able to be more nimble, be able to get things done faster while you have the IT team supporting them. So this is an exciting conversation, and I appreciate being on the panel.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Wayne.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wayne Pan. I'm actually medical director at San Francisco Health Plan, which I've been associated with for over a decade. San Francisco Health Plan is a Medicaid managed care plan that operates only in San Francisco and has about 300,000 members. And my focus is really on utilization management, but also on regulatory requirements and meeting those. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move into the panel Q&A, where all or a few of our members of our panel may speak to each question. So if you, as the audience, have questions in mind, I'll let you know when we're moving into the audience Q&A phase, but please hold your questions for now. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we want to talk about automation, but also creating a culture of automation in your organizations. Let's start with the bigger picture. Can you introduce the overarching automation vision? What were you looking to achieve and why? And who'd ever like to take the first stab, just go for it.
I mean, for us, in behavioral health, there's a couple of nuances in behavioral health that just don't exist on the medical side. So when you're talking about things like utilization management, on the medical side, 95% of your decisions are a code, a diagnosis, and a decision. Nothing really in behavioral health looks like that. All of ours are services that you visualize an episode of care. It may be multiple different services over long periods of time. Some of these levels of care or service go on for years. So it is a very different service and care model. And so if you're part of the issue for us is, oh, we built it for medical, it'll work for you. I'm like, no, it won't work for us. Thank you. You just basically guaranteed we won't be able to do what we need to do. So a lot of it is raising the awareness. Okay, what is it that you're doing? And the more complex and more nuanced it is, you have to be very careful about automation decisions. The second thing was, okay, do we have the right information for which to make automated decisions? Because you're thinking utilization management, you're really thinking, hey, who is this provider? Who is this patient? Are there any issues in either of them that you think need to be managed? Not necessarily from a yes or no standpoint, but even from do they need more help? Make sure they're getting the services, because sometimes the management is actually making sure they're getting access to care. So having the correct data to identify and then allow the simple routine things to be automated and then to parse out the more complex. Because what you don't want to be doing is make automated decisions in complex scenarios. That almost guarantees the wrong answer. So for us, it's literally, do we have the information and are we able to categorize correctly into kind of simple and more complex? That's been our goal for the last few years now.
I think we had kind of a similar situation. The most recent thing that we automated was around our oncology product. And what we wanted to do was actually change the clinical engine within our system. Oncology, obviously, everybody knows, very complicated. And from a health plan perspective, very sensitive issue. You only have to look at this week's press around Illumina and Grail, where they sent out 400 notices to people from a test that they might have cancer, to understand that this is an area that the health plan really, really has to be careful in. So what we were trying to do in terms of a vision was make sure that we could have an automated solution that had an easy workflow for offices and for our own staff, and that it had an easy ability to maintain and update what was going on in the market. ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, convention is in Chicago this week. And so that's why when you're following the trade press now, you see all these studies being reported about new drugs or new treatments that did or didn't work. We know that starting next week, people that attended ASCO are going to want to start using that stuff as new starts for their patients. And, you know, when they show up at the health plan and say, I want to get authorized for this, here's the paper just presented in ASCO, this is a game changer. We need to be able to adapt to that and move in real time.
Yeah, and Lisa, I'll offer a few comments from, again, Chad Murphy from Premera. You know, our broader vision, as you asked that question, was really steeped in almost like a lean culture around removing waste. And when we thought about many of our processes and anything within the utilization management perspective, the lens from the provider standpoint, the lens from the customer standpoint, the lens from, say, the health plan, there are steps along that whole continuum that we believe and have believed for years. As again, I'm probably preaching to a lot of you that know this, but that there's a lot of waste in all those steps. And I think in various aspects of that, we've known that we could take technology, we've known that we could leverage, you know, trying to use automation from a standpoint of getting unstructured data perhaps into structured formats that allow humans to do the work that we want them to. So a lot of our vision was around that aspect of thinking about the human side of it, and on some level, the burdens that we're putting at all the humans' feet in doing a lot of this work, when we know that some of that automation can take that away and we can save the humans for a lot of the decision making and the various components around, you know, the clinical cares and decision and all the nuance that does exist in this healthcare system we work in. And so that's what really drove us and will continue driving us, I would say, for the next many years, when we think about how do we keep advancing and just trying to get that waste out of the system.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
I was just going to follow up on what Chad said. Basically, from our perspective, we wanted to create an audit-proof process. You know, since all of our industries are, you know, especially in healthcare, is regulated, we want to make sure that things that we do are complete, they're timely, they're standardized, and we want to reduce the rework that often happens when humans, you know, make decisions that may not necessarily follow the regs. Second thing was basically efficiency. We wanted to enable higher throughput, because much of the work that we do, both in UM and quality, is really piecework. And there really is a lack of well-trained RNs out there that can do this work. So we want to make their life as efficient as possible. And then finally, we just really want to be able to be more nimble with respect to new regulations and standards that frequently come down and have a short time frame of implementation. And having automation really helps us be able to adapt quickly to new rules and regs.
Thank you. So now that we understand the broader vision and the big picture, let's talk about how we get there. You know, these are ideas, but they need to be turned into business initiatives, to projects, to funded objectives. Can you talk more about some of your priorities and how you established a business case to get automation started? We have a lot of customers maybe listening who have ideas, have somewhere they want to be, maybe even an idea for a project, but they need to formalize it and get a team assembled and get a budget and get buy-in. Can you talk about how you went from vision to actually enacting it from a project perspective?
Yeah, I'll take one stab at this real quick. For us, we had done a bunch of outsourcing around our clinical engine. And as our product grew, we're serving coming up on 50 million lives. What we were paying for the outsourcing just got to be too huge. And we went through some negotiations with our business partner to try and make it look more economical. But at the end, you know, there was so much that we could do in terms of efficient development that for us, the business case was pretty straightforward, right? It was, here's what we're paying outside to get this stuff done. Here's what we think we can build it for inside. Here's why we have confidence. You know, Chad mentioned inheriting technical debt and stuff. So a lot of time spent on, here's why we think we can actually bring this project in on time and under budget, or on budget and on time. So we got a lot of confidence around that. And then, you know, we were able to get the funding for it. I will say that despite what we thought we could get it done, we built in about a 6-month cushion on the back end that we didn't talk a lot about to the business team and the development team in case things kind of went sideways. But for us, the economics were pretty straightforward. What are we spending outside? What's our build cost? And then what's our operating cost? I think the last thing I'd add is, if that is the case that you're going through, we tried to have pretty realistic discussions with some of our vendors about, what the economics were of this. And I think like so many people that once you've outsourced the service, they kind of think that you have no alternative. And I can remember being in the negotiations and saying, I don't have any alternative this year, right? But given enough time and money, I can have an alternative. And I don't think that was taken seriously. So it just, for us, like I said, it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
For us, okay.
Sorry, Frank, I'll just jump in and kind of pivot a little off of Mike's comments there. So the way we see automation happening in the payer space, particularly nowadays, is there are great ideas and there are great initiatives and everyone's starting to come to the table to discuss it, but it seems overwhelming and it seems too big. And what ends up happening traditionally within the payer space, from my experiences, it's always about a shiny technology object and everyone tries to gravitate towards this could be the solution or we could buy this product. And what we've seen work really well over the past 5 or 6 years now is, you hear people talk about fast fail and prove something or don't prove something. It's even more than that. It's, let's sit down and talk about the process. What do you want to get out of it? Let's optimize it. Let's truly talk about what matters. And then at the heart of that, what really is the challenge within the payer space when it comes to solutions is the configurability of those solutions. The business changes so frequently that if you want to have an automated solution, you better be able to be nimble enough, kind of as Wayne mentioned, to be able to make changes on the fly. If something's happening within the right parameters, I know everyone in IT gets scared when I say change on the fly. No more hot, no hot deployments or anything, but the ability to be able to make changes to rules when it matters, when it makes a difference, versus having to put aside a budget and wait 4 to 6 months. And a lot of that work around how to configure those rules or those decisions really comes down to how you should always think about starting these big projects. Forget about everything else that needs to get done. Start doing some POCs, start doing some wireframing, put your thoughts down on paper around, will this configuration work this way? Will this rule set work this way? What else is going to happen? And soon you'll figure out that you're starting to build a configurable solution versus building a technology solution and then figuring out how to configure it.
Yeah, and I would say for behavioral health especially, but certain parts of medical management as well, structured data is critical, but the most of the thought value in information is in unstructured or free text. So for us, it's making sure that we have that kind of optical character recognition, natural language processing ability, so that we begin to tag concepts, because you will be basically taken blind advantage of if you're a health plan and all you're relying on is unstructured text. The most profitable service for a provider to provide, and at least that I'm aware of, is poor quality substance use disorder treatment, because people don't get better. They just stay in programs forever and ever and ever. And they know exactly which boxes to check to get authorization for care. And if that's the way you structure the system, you're going to get robbed blind. It happens over and over and over again. It's not necessarily criminal. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't. It's just poor quality. But that actually is a very easy way to get wealthy, unfortunately, in healthcare. And they're basically doing it on the backs of people who really do need better care than they're getting. So that ability to consume free text and be able to understand and build a case, that is really critical. And that's something that, there are certain things that are checkbox, very simple to do. That's the easiest part. Getting into that next step, and that's something we've been working on to try to improve our optical character recognition, natural language processing capabilities, because there's a lot that you can glean from that information that is not going to be in structured text.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think one of the things that enables projects to get started is measurability. You need to establish the metrics that provide confidence to leadership that this won't be just another expensive IT project that goes on forever and ever. Measurability helps identify whether or not this is on track and what the outcomes are supposed to be. And that leads to really identifying near-term and long-term measurable wins. And metrics will contribute to making sure that that makes it easier. The other thing to consider is what's the risk of not doing this, right? So it's not about just projecting a win, but what's the risk if you don't do this? You have to look at competitive advantage. You have to look at overtime and lack of staffing. You need to also predict whether this problem you're trying to solve is going to get bigger or smaller, right? All those things are can contribute to making the business case to do this. And as Amir said, I think starting small is definitely important to do, because you don't want this to be a gargantuan project that's going to take 12 layers of approval.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a wide range of objectives and approaches to get there, but one thing is in common: stakeholder buy-in. That is always key. Best idea in the world, best approach, best plan, but you need stakeholder buy-in. Can you talk more about creating a culture of buy-in for automation? I know automation is largely misunderstood. It seemed like a buzzword for a long time. As you said, we've all been burned by large and long technology implementations, and this just looks like it's the next thing, the next version of some big, long project that may not produce any results. Can we talk about how in your organization, you working on shifting toward an automation first mindset, as opposed to seeing it as a follow-on or an add-on activity? And how are you forging the relationships between business and IT to achieve that vision?
Yeah, Lisa, maybe I'll lead off here and people can springboard. First off, I would say that I don't know that we've absolutely created that. So your question is a good one, but I think that it is a constant type of thinking that is going to take time to maybe always think. I think you mentioned automation first. I would definitely say we're not probably an automation first type of company. Maybe we're automation second or third. It's one of the aspects that we bring into, I think, the ecosystem as we think about problems. But I would say that, when you think about setting various goals, and I think, Wayne, as you were talking previously, it sort of made me think about, as you think about whatever problem you're trying to solve in this regard, and you've set various goals, I think a lot of those goals sort of lead you to make sure that you're thinking about automation, and can automation achieve one of those goals? But I'll give an example where maybe it can't. One of the goals that we look at with some of this work is around, say, the human or the end user satisfaction. And so a lot of times we develop a lot of business type goals that are focused on whatever, productivity, financials, typical things that would just pop into our brains when you're thinking about solving a problem. But we've tried to bring in a little bit more of the human element as well. So all of those are important, but even things like staff satisfaction. And so as you bring on types of automation, you may want to consider, how do you talk to the people that are the end users? And if what you've done and what you've changed or automated leads to something positive, I think that's where we've started seeing, like, okay, you're building a culture of where you bring in various types of automation, which can be very threatening to a workforce, because oftentimes people equate automation with, oh, am I going to lose my job? They internalize that very quickly. And so as we think about it, we've been working, it's kind of interesting, but with our HR departments a bit on some of that, to make sure that you don't build a culture where they're afraid, say, of automation because of what it could do to jobs, but look at as to how can it augment. And actually, I go back to the burdens that we often put at people's feet and all the work and manual tasks, of how that frees them to actually do the human work that we need them to. So there is a reality in it. Sometimes automation, you're right, does replace jobs. Totally get it. But at the same time, we're trying to bring in that flavor of it. So a few comments there, and we probably still have a path to go, I know, where I work, in that sort of automation first.
Those are good thoughts, Chad. I would add, look, this is not for the faint of heart, okay? Healthcare is extremely complex. You have clinical people, you have business people, you have IT people. In many organizations are so large they don't even talk to each other half the time, right? So you have got to cross all of the normal silos. You're going to be working with people outside of your normal area that don't speak a language so to speak. Clinical people kind of talk about things clinically, business kind of talk about it business-wise. IT talks about tech, and they may all use the same word and mean three completely different things depending on who the person is. So you've got to have an understanding of how the language and how the culture in the different parts of a company work. And you've got to think about this in terms of this is a long-term play. So for automation in these kind of days, as Amir knows, we've been working on this for about 5 years now. And it is a very slow incremental. And if you cannot explain to your staff why I need people to focus more intensely on complex situations and to stop focusing on things that we don't need to do anything about, and that you can't explain it in a way that people assume they're going to get fired, you have a really hard time selling this to anybody. So it's got to be, you have to be able to articulate what it is you're doing, what does your end state look like, and then all the incremental change, because it's not going to be a 0 to 1. It's an incremental process over time, and all of your incremental changes have to be in service of that long-term vision or plan, which needs to be understood well. Otherwise, it's just going to get shot down, because it's not something that's going to happen in 12 months. It is much longer term, and a lot of companies struggle to think about things that take more than a year to do. So it is a definite culture shift, and it's not easy to do.
Yeah, I think for us, there were a few things. Because we were replacing somebody outside in this most recent project, people didn't necessarily fear for jobs. I think there was a lot of buy-in from the operating staff of, these are the shortcomings of what we have. We've been using it for multiple years. These are all the new bells and whistles and features, the giant Christmas shopping list with dad's credit card that people wanted. So I think there was a lot of buy-in there. I think where the buy-in got a little bit tougher for us was we had to make sure finance understood this is going to be a 1.5 or 2 year build, right? So the payback's year 3, it's not in year. And being a public company, everybody's always, are we amortizing it? What's cash flow? Those kinds of things, which private companies have too. It's just you don't have as many people staring at you. I think the hardest buy-in that we had was around the technology decisions. We used some different technology in this project, and obviously, it's an Appian call. We ended up using Appian, but that was a mindset shift for a lot of our development shop. They had some experience with Appian in the past, but not that much, and typically had used a lot of other tools. And so it was really getting IT technical leadership to come on board with, hey, we're going to use some new tools here. We're going to use them in different ways than we used them in the past. And we're not going to obsolete the IT staff where we had to work hard on buy-in.
And I think to comment off of what other people said so far, this is all about value-based care, right? So we're taking value-based care externally and bringing it internally in-house, because some of the things that we're asking people to do may not be the most valuable thing that they could do. And so what does value-based care mean to the employee, the average employee? What does it mean to the managers? And how are they managing all the things that they're doing? And the second thing is culture building really requires common language. As Frank pointed out, every language that you use can mean different things. And it requires that the leadership help line managers and staff understand what the goal is, right? What are we trying to do and accomplish as a team? And automation is one of the tools that you can pull out as something that can increase the value of the things that people are doing.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of finish this segment by just saying real quick, ultimately empowering the people who are going to be using the system at the end of the day to be part of the decision-making process. And that's why that whole fast fail at the beginning works well, because you can show people why a direction is needed, but it also buys you time to have the real, as Chad kind of mentioned, working through HR and other avenues, have a real discussion with your workforce to say, look, this is happening. These are all the great new opportunities that are coming on board. This is why the shift is, and you can, it's not 100% proof, but there's going to be an opportunity there where you're going to get a lot of folks seeing the vision, understanding the change, and coming along for the ride, which always makes the adoption a lot easier. Because the worst thing that can happen is you spend millions of dollars on a brand new process efficient system, and your users still try to use it the old way and try to work around it, then you're not gaining all the efficiencies and ROIs that you were chasing, and that defeats the purpose. So it really is a people process to start these massive initiatives, these large project transformational stuff, and then focusing on the technology.
Excellent. Thank you all. So as discussed, vision and alignment is key, and getting to the desired outcomes is the hard part. Let's pretend it's 2 years from now. It's June 6th of 2025, which will probably be here before we know it. But thinking of yourself in that time, what results and business value did you achieve? What is your victory statement? What is your newspaper headline when you look back to now?
Well, I think for us, it's, I mean, we've deployed, we've gone live, you know, we're going through some hiccups that anybody goes through when you launch a new product. I think for us, success is we, you know, the system's still running. We're getting better statements out of the, or better value out of the people that are using the system. But it's really just, hey, you know, like, we're still alive. We did it. Everything's still running. Because there's a lot of energy about bringing a new system into place. But as Chad talked about technical debt, you know, just getting it up is the first part, right? There's all of the stuff that you have to do. You know, we launched minimum viable product, so to speak, right? And then there's V1, V2, V3, V4, all of the things that got pushed out. So for us, the victory statement is thing is still running, and we continue to, you know, continue to maintain it, I think.
For us, I think it's going to be that what we do actually makes sense to our employees and providers. They may not agree with it 100%, but they understand why we're doing it this way. And that, you know, people can actually, instead of maybe hating us, because that's what they do with insurance, is actually see that, you know, we're trying to get out of the way for things that are going well. But we absolutely have to manage some of this stuff because there is a lot of things that happen in the provider community that you need to manage actively. And that, you know, some people don't like to say that, but that is the reality. So that you're doing the stuff you need to do and you're getting out of the way of the rest. Get there in a year and a half, maybe, probably not. Then 3 to 4 years, much more likely.
You know, Lisa,
Other panel members? Go ahead, Wayne.
I'll go after Wayne. Go ahead, Wayne.
I'm sorry. From my perspective, you know, within 2 years, we're hoping that we are able to develop a framework really to help our team members address new problems that our external environment will throw at us, right? So whether it's regulatory requirements that constantly are changing, or membership growth, or establishing new products. So having that framework is really critical, and automation obviously is part of that. The other part of this is resilience and competitive advantage. So better member and provider satisfaction, reduction of grievances related to plan services, and then less provider abrasion related to UN processes.
Wayne, I think there's a similar theme in there for us. Again, I mentioned lean early on. There's an aspect to this for us that's just about the culture of continuous improvement. And that really, honestly, knowing that there's really no end to this, that it's just a journey, and that, yeah, you may have, you know, stop points at a year, 2 years, 3 years, where you look and say, hey, we're achieving something. But I think the broader aspect is really about that culture, is can we just build that, knowing that, again, technology is going to change. I mean, I guarantee in 3 years, we're going to be having something that we haven't even contemplated yet. And we're going to be scratching our heads about, like, oh my gosh, like, can you imagine we were doing that in 23? So we have that viewpoint. I think if you want to get just a little more specific, so that's probably our Super Bowl, but I often look at it as triangle. And I don't know if this helps people out or not, but it's somewhat of there's an affordability aspect, there's a quality piece, and then there's an experience piece. I think affordability is pretty obvious. You know, there's financial considerations behind all of this. If you think about the quality side of it, I think maybe Frank or maybe Mike talked a little bit about, and maybe even you, Wayne, touch base on that. The quality side, many of us are clinicians. You've got to stick to quality. What we're dealing with is people's health here. It's the most important thing we focus on. So we're never going to do something incorrect that's going to basically compromise that. So quality is at the tip of that. And then lastly, the experience side. So that third kind of piece of it, I look at that, and I hate to break it down again, but just for people, how we look at it is The experience for us, since we're in healthcare, is providers, customers, and then our teams. And those three people all matter a lot. Our providers are delivering the care, we are not. So we have to understand that. Our customers, of course, are the ones that are paying the bills and are, unfortunately having to deal with maybe insurance in ways that they don't want to, as Wayne kind of mentioned. And then lastly, it comes down to our own teams. So experience kind of circulates in those three areas. So that's our sort of framework as to I look at from a Super Bowl. So Amir, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think it's from a services business where we have the opportunity to be out there with different clients and the work that we're doing in building these large scale systems. The hope is that in 2 years, the word automation and transformation aren't scary words. They're more commonly used to say, look at the success we've had here. Look at how well this worked. There's a line of other executives waiting to say, we got to transform this system. And we have a playbook now that's proven to work versus if you look back over the investments that have been made in the payer space, you can make the argument there's a lot of these technologies that were technical debt from day one, the solutions that you implemented or you took on that were never going to have the chance to be that scalable future state solution for you. And if this playbook of fast fail, process optimized, get your people through the door and bought in early is the sort of the new gateway, then maybe automation becomes even more of a buzzword, day-to-day, easy use, and no one's getting scared of it. Versus I know right now, when you go in for a business case and say, we're going to automate or modernize or transform something, that to everybody just means a ton of dollars and no proof, track record of success. So in 2 years, hopefully there's a line of people waiting to say, I want a new prior auth system. I need a new clinical snapshot. I need a new this, I need a new that. And everyone's like, that's the path, that's the way forward.
All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to the last question, and then we'll move into audience Q&A. And sorry, we didn't prepare you guys for this one. I think I'd like to add it on the fly, keep things interesting. So we just talked about the future, but let's look in the past. So who we have on this call today are peers of yours looking to understand how to get into automation and best leverage it. We have those from services and software organizations looking to understand their customer better. Can you tell us what you would say to yourself 2 years ago versus where you are now? Something that you learned that you didn't realize then, that for those that are starting the journey fresh right now, they can already learn a lesson from you. 2 years flew by, so I don't know where you were 2 years ago, but I'm sure you weren't as advanced on your journey. You were new, you were maybe a skeptic, maybe you were a believer, but just what would you say to your early self at the start of this?
Yeah, this sounds like a job interview question where I explain my weakness, that I'm a perfectionist.
Said I care too much.
I care too much. I haven't mastered the work-life balance at this age in my life, and I have. But I think when I look back over the history of the project, we got a lot of early energy in it and got it kicked off well. And then there was a period of time where, while there was a lot of action, there wasn't a lot of progress. And I think what we did to make some of that progress happen quicker was, and I'm biased, but we ended up getting a little bit more business people or people with the business vision involved in the product. We sort of started out like, this is what we want. We got an IT team. Okay, guys, start with requirements, documents, and everything else. And because we were working in an area of specialized expertise, we were working in oncology, right? Frank was working in mental health. IT folks don't have all of that knowledge, and so they're kind of doing the best that they can. But I think until the designers and things really started to understand the clinical problems that we were trying to solve, once they got that, then they had a little bit more of a North Star over what the tool's functionality should look like. At this point in time, I wouldn't go to any of them for oncology care, but they know the language, right? And they understand the terms, and that makes a big difference then. Especially when you're in later pieces of development, and now you're exposing a lot of clinicians to what's going on. So I would tell myself, make sure that you have a few more people. Once you get past the initial energy, make sure you keep some people there that have subject matter expertise, really and truly engaged, right? Not once a week on a steering committee, but 2 hours, 3 days a week.
Thank you.
Went to a health tech startup meeting in April. One of the CEOs there, he paraphrased Kennedy's, why choose the moon speech. He made the comment, their take on it was, we don't choose to do this thing because it's easy. We choose to do it because we thought it was easy. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of that. Like, had I realized how difficult the path was going to be, I'm not sure I would have done it. So, but at least at this point, I have a pretty good idea of when I'm wading into these messes of what it's going to take and what it's going to get. But patience, persistence, clarity, people are not opposing you because they think you're an idiot. They're opposing you because you're talking about something that they've never thought about. And if somebody's done their job in the same way for 15 years, that's really actually very anxiety producing to talk about, hey, we could do this differently. You're just realizing you're going to have to repeat the same thing, sometimes the same people over and over again. Patience and persistence, kindness. My brain can see from A to wherever I need to get to, usually in a matter of seconds. As my wife likes to tell me, other people's brains don't work like that. You just because you're there, you're going to have to bring, if you want them to buy into this, you're going to have to bring them along. So there's a lot of that, just kind of really understand this is not fast, especially in a big company, and that it's going to be chaotic, and whatever you thought you were going to do at the beginning, it's not going to look like that by the time you're done, but that's not bad because you learn a lot by just talking to other people. Because I love it when people prove me wrong, because I learned something. Like, that's great. I got smarter. Cool. That's wonderful. There's just that whole, you got to have a long-term vision on this. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I think 2 years ago we were in the middle of COVID pandemic, and things were pretty chaotic at the provider level and also at the plan. And one of the things that I think we realized is that the workforce is not static, and that efficiency is not a luxury. It's important to view this whole process as a continuous quality improvement effort, as Chris has pointed out earlier, or Chad had pointed out earlier. And just like we have a fail-safe approach to our IT infrastructure, we need to have the same approach to our internal processes and have a better understanding of what's going on within our organization so that we are able to solve those problems before they become fires.
Yeah, maybe one thing I'll just key on, I think, great point, so I won't try and double down on any of those. One of the things that I would think about a lot more, and I don't know, this is a collaborative type of a project, as we've all talked through, the business architecture, and I'll use that term from kind of the technical architecture side of things, is so much more complicated than I could have ever realized when you really dig into some of this automation and all the connections that exist within probably many of our companies, with whether it's tech debt or just our tech stack. And so when I think about automating, and in our work with Appian and the work that we did, although I wouldn't say it was a huge project, but the bite-sized bits that we're working with Appian on some of this, I think making sure that you can really map that architecture well and understand all those integration points with your systems before you start trying to unplug and replug is a big piece that I think maybe we all underestimated a little bit at times within some of our other automation efforts as well. So I'll just double down on that piece that might help some of you as you think through this. Think about that architecture and the technical connection points across your entire ecosystem, external and internal. And Lisa,
Amir, anything you'd like to add? I'm sorry, go ahead, Chad.
I was just saying, and that's me telling myself that right now. So now I'm
I was gonna say amen to that. I mean, the business architecture itself is very complex, and that's part of that whole getting started. I think all I'll say is, well, what I personally learned is change is hard, and changing cultures is even harder. And you think about it, and the way you try to explain all these solutions and you show them stuff, it's all great. But it's there's such a big barrier to changing the way that it's been done, changing the way everyone looks at a project. And then what's interesting is there's a point where it triggers and it's like shifts, and they're like, oh, this is great. Like once they get it, once it's done right, once they see it, and then you can't slow them down. And then you got the other opposite problem where everyone's trying to run too fast. And I've been fortunate enough to be on both sides of those, where I've seen projects not get adopted because change is hard, and other projects where the stakeholders were bought in and moved so quickly that it lost the initial vision, and kind of to Chad's point, the whole business architecture and everything else is out the door because they just wanted to push releases and the next MVP and the next set of iterations and the next set of stories. So there needs to be a lot of thought and planning put into and retrospective reviews of what's going on and how are things going, and open lines of communication. But it's absolutely the thing that's happening, and it's people are going to pick up and adopt it more and more quickly here.
Excellent, thank you. So we'd like to continue the dialogue. That closes our round of moderated Q&A, but we'd love to open it up to the audience to ask questions. Please, there's no stupid questions. There's no too simple questions. This group is a wealth of knowledge and would love to just talk with you. So if you have questions in the audience, please put them in the chat and then I'll read them out. Okay, so I'll start. We have a hit. This is from Brian from the Appian team. He's referring to that a few of you spoke to reducing or eliminating waste in your organizations, and he's wondering how you identify and measure that waste. And once you've identified where it's occurring, how do you decide where to start making improvements and prioritize projects? So I think there's generally a lot of waste, and how are you picking what's waste, and then how are you quantifying it?
Yeah, maybe I'll lead off there because I think Brian, I appreciate that question. I've mentioned waste quite a few times and maybe some of my comments. Waste can show up, and if you're in lean culture, it's kind of like the 4 M's. It can be within the man, it can be within the machines, your methodology as well. And so we look at it in all those sort of that ecosystem, and depending on where, we've tried to train our staff to say, if you find it, raise that hand. Feel safe to do that, even if it's calling out processes that you hold near and true to your heart. Again, this gets to the cultural stuff that Amir was doubling down on, and I just really appreciate, because if you have that type of culture, then you just start measuring whatever that might be. It could be a machine waste, it could be a human waste. A lot of it is, it feels like what comes to our measurement point quite often is time. It feels like just that turnaround, different times or different time it takes to do various tasks is often at I won't say the center always, but in some way. And with that time, then you get to financial calculations and different components. So that's really how we've done it. And then I think your closing question is around how do you prioritize projects? There's definitely an art to that. And, sometimes if you live in more of a continuous improvement type of system, it's all about taking just those little bites over and over again, and hopefully it's a bigger bite over time. But I wouldn't say that I'll just point fingers at ourselves, that we get that right all the time. I think that we probably make some miscalculations of, well, we should have done that first versus this along our journey.
For us, I don't know that I'd so much say we're looking at waste as we're looking at opportunity, right? You're operating with the systems that you have and the workflows that you have, and hopefully they're as good as they can be. So we're not necessarily saying all this stuff is being wasted. What we're really saying is there's opportunities to pick other stuff up. I think when push comes to shove, though, if you automate, eventually the only way those dollars come out is either in staffing or total cost of ownership, right? Which also eventually becomes people. And so I think when you're talking about how to prioritize products and what you're going to do, we're trying to look for the best return we can. But being in the healthcare business, you've got X amount of IT dollars or X amount of IT staff available. It's not always about just the money. Sometimes it's about having the IT staff that's actually available, that you can hire or you can find through outsourcing. And so for us, I think we prioritize them. Kind of first is compliance stuff, right? Then we got client stuff. And then we're trying to look at what we can optimize and everything else, because you can't walk away from the first two. And when you've got technical debt, sometimes those first two suck up a lot. And so then it's just sort of a dogfight, I guess, at the end. Everybody has 30 projects that want to get done. What's the ROI? What's the ability to actually get it done? How confident are you in the success? you know, and do you have a champion someplace besides just you, right? Is IT championing it? Is the owner of a business line championing it? You know, who up in the organization can you get to carry the water when the hard decisions get made in August or September for what you're going to do next year?
Great question. I mean, and for us, a lot of times, some of the most wasteful part that we have is actually when we're doing implementations because of the way that our project management and our IT departments are structured and how they do things. You know, in general, it's easier to prove, you know, that the human, you know, kind of salary cost, if you can make something faster, that's probably the easiest thing to sell. It's easier for people to wrap their head around. If you're talking about those spending money to maybe use technology to make something more efficient, that can be a much murkier argument in making sure that you're really solid on the numbers, that you know you're not promising things that really you're not going to deliver. I think is really critical, and I think this a lot of times kind of, you know, multifunctional area champions, because you know, behavioral health, I can't get IT changes done alone. I have to partner with a whole bunch of other people. And to be able to do that and then show the value of that, it's helped because we partnered with Amir's team and the small group internally in IT to build a clinical data aggregation tool, which is actually all of our clinicians are using now. And it's something, had we done it the normal way, it would have been 5 times more expensive and it wouldn't work as well. So, you know, there's a lot of ways. The question is, you know, the easiest one to prove is, well, we have too many people doing this and we can do it with 20% less. Everything else, it becomes, you know, a plausibility, believability trade-off that you have to be able to articulate and argue well. And some of that's just coming from gaining credibility and not just relying on yourself, but trying to draw on other areas as well.
Excellent. Any other panelists would like to weigh in, or any other questions in the audience? We have about 5 minutes left. One more question, anyone? I'll give you a minute to, you know, formulate your thought. All right, Nick has a question. Nick, if you'd like to come off mute and just speak.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa. So really, when we look at all of this, and I appreciate everybody's time and efforts in this and honesty, it's been really just fantastic to hear everybody's perspective. When you look at these initiatives, really, do you see the decision-making and the cycle time reducing for these projects? That's kind of part one. And then secondly, if so, how quickly do you see that? I'm curious as to the kind of life cycle management of identification of a business need to project to IT in the past 20 years has been significantly slow. And I see automation speeding that up, in my own opinion, but I'd really like to know what you guys think about that impact.
I'll take a first stab. I mean, for us, I think it was probably a little bit over a year to get through this, just because, you know, we started out with the idea of we want to do something different. We want to change, you know, bring some stuff internally. So essentially, you know, by September or October of 2022, let's say, you know, most of 2023 IT is allocated to some degree to projects, right? So you're starting to say, look, I got this project, I want to do it. It's going to generate X amount of savings. And, you know, so we're starting in like January, February, March, so that by the time we get to August, September and are making decisions, we got a shot at getting into the IT budget for the following year. So I'd say from the time we started, you know, selling this idea internally until the time we actually started coding, you know, it was all 12 months for sure. And, you know, in our particular case, we also had some fits and starts because, you know, we had a lot of contract terms with the external vendor, right? And so we were looking at when are those terms up? What are our renewal options? What are their termination options? You know, if they hear we're going to replace them, you know, that puts us in a bad negotiating position. So for us, it was more than a year in terms of starting looking for support until we started writing code. You know, so I don't know if it's gotten any shorter in our world. Maybe the other guys have some different experience.
Yeah, I would support what Mike said. I think there still is a legacy sort of way of making decisions in large organizations. And even though San Francisco Health Plan is much smaller than the other companies represented here, but we're just as mired in the red tape and decision paralysis as everyone else. But I think one way that can help move things a little bit faster to meet with the fast changing healthcare environment is demonstrating what the alternative might be, right? Because when you talk about something that is going to be better, I think people always think that that's never going to happen. But I think the reality of what will be if you don't do anything, I think is a lot easier for people to understand. And then they're making plans for it right now. Like, oh, well, we have to hire more staff. We have to, that we can't find. We have to meet these requirements that we're not going to be able to meet. And representing the alternative, if we don't do this, is something that I think drives a faster decision at least in our organization.
I wish I could say that worked where I am. It's like that we'll have to hire more staff. The response is, no, we have a hiring freeze. You can't. It's like, add membership, don't add staff. It's like we just work harder, right? Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, we're in the middle of kind of working to overhaul how we look at these decisions. But you know, because historically it's an 18 to 24 month process to get major decisions done and executed, and that is way too slow. And there's almost no ability that if the parameters change or you discover new information in the implementation process, it's almost impossible to change. So it's like you end up almost forcing a build for something that really is not going to be correct, which that doesn't actually cost any less money to build it incorrectly than it does to build it correctly. So yeah, getting that change. So you know, it's going to take us another 6 to 12 months, I think, where we kind of figure out. We're in the middle right now of, well, I don't really know where we would send that idea to. So we're trying to make it streamlined and easy, but we're right in the middle of the chaos. Well, don't do it the old way, but we're not sure exactly what the new way is yet. So it's a very interesting time right now. So I'm just going to push ideas wherever I need to push them. But yeah, I do think there's a realization we've got to get better at this. We can't take 2 years to make decisions on stuff.
Excellent. Well, with that, we are at time. That hour flew by. Chad, Frank, Mike, Wayne, and Amir, we are so grateful for your time today and sharing your wisdom with us. There was a lot that we learned, a lot retrospectively, a lot future looking, better understanding your position. We are really grateful for the time you spent with us today, and we would like to thank you on behalf of Appian.
Thanks for inviting me.
Appreciate the invite.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.